So we've gotten some more money from the budget to do another 1,000 to 2,000 LED street lamps. We're working with the astronomy community to make sure that those street lamps are okay with their peering into the night sky, and so far, so good. They're fine with it. So that's...
Question?
Sure.
What about public education? Are you gonna try and weave that in during your second phase?
Yeah, I think when we talk about the education outreach and community projects that we're going to do, we are going to put LED street lamps and area lamps in the areas we've talked about before, like Pahala and different areas. So as far as education and outreach and energy efficiency, that would be a very good area to talk about the LED street lamp program. So to answer your question, yes. And we have gotten accolades from Washington DC for our LED street lamp program, and we have gotten news articles written about us on the LED street lamp program. Okay, so as you know, there's a there's a conference, electric utility conference, March 26th. Blueprint for the utility of the future, and you can find that at that website that's listed there. Basically, the panel that I'm on is talking about customer side perspectives on the utility of the future. So I'll be talking about Hawaii with our high cost of energy, and also how government interacts in the docket, how government tries to support low income, and how government will try to encourage the utility to work in areas of economic development that we would like to see more focus on. For instance, at UH Hilo, if you could reduce the electric bill by $1 million, that's 100 more courses they could offer. So maybe there's some direct strategic initiatives we can do with the utility in areas like education. And then there's some energy efficiency education coming from Hawaii Energy, and those dates are listed under item 6, and you're welcome to attend that. They do collect 2% on every energy bill for their public benefit funds, which they're using to provide that education.
Well, could we schedule them to speak with us again?
Absolutely.
Or more on a regular basis? So
Yeah.
that we can more strongly encourage them individually?
No, I think that was highly effective when we did that last time, so I think it's time it's due. We should have them here, again, talking about the money they collect from Hawaii and how they're being deployed.
Right.
Okay.
So how do we do that?
We get it on the agenda, and then I'm empowered to make the phone call to Hawaii Energy.
Can we do that, Margaret?
We're gonna put that on our subcommittee. I have a question, Will, and if you can just help, even for the benefit of the public, just talk a little bit more about the Pinal House Storage Demonstration Project. You mentioned that there's 16 entities that applied. And can you just cover some of that?
Without going into details on the companies or the technologies, yes. There's 30 kilowatts of PV power that will be made available to anyone that wants to. So for instance, if someone wants to come and test a flywheel, a 10 kilowatt flywheel, there's a PV system provided under a Department of Energy grant that they can plug and play and test this, and HELCO will be responsible for comparing that technology to other technologies. So there'll be kind of a verification of cost, how it works, how it can be deployed on the grid. So it's a pre-commercial demonstration. So it's slated at companies that have passed the initial pilot and are ready to, test for the next deployment on a real grid.
So these are companies that are doing R&D versus having commercial available products? Is that right?
They've gotten past the pilot phase, so maybe they've gotten some venture capital, maybe they've gotten a DOE grant, like I believe Amber Kinetics out of California, which is a flywheel, has gotten Department of Energy funding, and now they're ready to deploy on the grid, they believe, with a PV project providing the energy to spin the flywheel. So they tout their flywheel as, basically being able to spin at 100,000 plus revolutions per minute, and only seeing a degradation of 5% in a 24-hour cycle. So they believe they can provide firm power, so coupled with an intermittent source like wind or PV, they believe they can provide firm power to the grid, whether it's for water pumping or other uses.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, thanks.
You had mentioned that Telco was gonna be doing assessment.
Yes.
Working with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and Sandia, are they gonna also be involved in the evaluation and assessment
We hope-
aspect of this?
We hope so. So Greg Barber is going to visit Lawrence Berkeley National Lab this month, as well as Sandia. So both
And that's the intent, is to ask them for that?
ask them for assistance in verification as well, and also maybe looking for money to support this plug-and-play type demonstration in L.
What are the critical target dates for this project?
Well, we've already signed the MOU, and we're now looking for people to become storage projects. So I would say, if you're saying critical dates right now, whoever wants to plug and play and test their device should come before the NELHA board or research advisory committee to submit their proposal for storage demo.
And is there a target date as far as implementation?
Oh, well, that would depend on with the utility. So wherever they would like to actually test that in real time would be, or it could be at NELHA. So there may be a PV project like Cyanotek, I believe, is putting up a 0.5 megawatt of PV. So there may be a place right there to put a storage device.
Well,
Yes,
are we like the first ones to do this, or are there projects like this being actually done elsewhere?
it's unique to have a county government, the state, and the utility in an MOU doing this. I believe because it's a pre-commercial demo, that we're one of the very few people that are right before deploying it on a utility grid. So I think this is the first of its kind.
Any more questions for Will?
Just one on OTEC projects, and any update with conference in Kumijima?
Yes, well, we don't have a date for the conference yet, but I know that the government of Japan is looking for money to take the place of OTEC International at the 55-inch pump station to do a 1 megawatt OTEC demonstration. So currently, the Japanese have expressed interest, and finding the money is currently what they're doing. OTEC International is interested still in doing a project there, but at a much lower megawatt level, call it half of that, a 500 or 300 kilowatt demonstration project. But the government of Japan is looking for money to do a 1 megawatt OTEC at NELHA.
And Lockheed is just moving on.
I haven't heard Lockheed talk about, they talk about 100 megawatt as being their target. So I haven't heard them talk about a 1 megawatt demo, but I've heard, I'm on the research advisory committee. We've ranked OTEC International first. We ranked the government of Japan second. And so government of Japan moves to number 1 if they can pull off a 1 megawatt OTEC project.
Thanks, Will, and, we appreciate the update you're doing, Ryan. It helps a lot.
It is helpful.
And-
Okay.
And it's good to research back, so we don't regurgitate things.
Yes. It also makes sure that I do new things every month. So, thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you. Yeah, moving on, we'll go through our subcommittee reports. Transportation,
Yeah, I have nothing new to report other than have some discussions with Tom Brown later. He was out of state. And if you recall the presentation that Dorothy sent out from the November, the last page, that actually had some 5 bullet points that we'll be discussing.
That's it. Okay, thank you. And policy?
I haven't had a chance to do much yet. I've been trying to send one position paper out to my committee members and have not had a response yet. If anybody here has any suggestions, I'd welcome them.
Well, I guess I'm not totally clear what direction the whole policy thing is going in terms of a focus. I know in the last meeting, there was some talk about securing grant funds for certain activities and that kind of thing at the county, but, you know, policy is a huge area, you know, and it can affect many, many things, and in fact, appropriately so, at the last meeting, they acknowledged that even the other subcommittees play into the policy area, and there's overlap in determining what policies and directions are to be established. So how do you even, like, have you begun to define the scope or what the boundaries are?
Not totally. I think what I began to do is to think about exactly that blanket. What we need are some very general directions to focus the efforts in. And I picked one as just a model to throw out on the table to my members. And as of this moment, I haven't had any comments, but it was a test run to see how we would approach that more than anything else. And I think that's the way to do it, is we need some kind of philosophy to be operating under in the long term. I don't think it has to be very specific. It should be very general. In other words, if, for example, a total county effort is to focus on a synthetic fuel, it should be very broad-based. It should only be a policy that says that would be a primary effort. That would be a primary focus. They have a lot of subroutes under it, but I don't think we should get into that. I think more important is what is the general direction we want to see. I've gone through I've read it twice and still haven't figured it out, the Kohala Center proposal, and I'm still trying to understand that. Now, that's kind of where I am as an individual now. We haven't had a chance to meet yet. I'm hoping we can soon.
I think it's critical that what Steve is trying to reach out, because policy will go hand in hand with other subcommittees as we move forward as well.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to think about, was in the broader aspect, not in a very specific detail. I think it's more of a philosophy to be taken than anything else. So if there is specific bills coming in, or is it aggressive, you know, it's a measuring point. Is that on the target everybody's looking at?
And to a certain extent, policies should address needs or problems that currently exist as well to correct or, you know, make modifications to that. So an acknowledgement or an understanding of what those might be. And obviously they keep, you know, surfacing, and it's not something you can just go out and gather in one place. But, you know, being attuned to, like, the inequity thing, how do you deal with that, you know, when it's just growing as a problem, you know? That seems like there needs to be policy of some sort to address that, but what is that, you know? So those are some big needs that are surfacing that are, you know, saying we need some policy out here, and you know, I don't know what the approach is to come up with that, or if that's a role that an advisory commission plays, or, you know, how we even get the ideas to
Well,
be
if there are
presented
thoughts
to
like
us.
that, I think that's what I'd welcome, any input on that way. Just send me a note through Dot. This is, you know, this is something to consider. So that when we are discussing, what I want to do is to try to, I like Will's representation of the mayor that says he wants 3. And if we just come up with 3 that address the broader aspect of policy, I would say that's a first target to try to achieve. So I threw one out on the table that I think is important, and that's related to ag water. And it's the energy related to that. And I think those are matters of policy which have to come about. How is it going to be approached? We know it's essential, but how is it going to be approached? So, you know, that's the kind of thing I'm looking at, and I think I know the island well enough to know all the pieces to it.
Yeah. So what it comes down to really is a shared vision of the future.
And once we draft something up, then we bring it in to this group to argue about it. I wanted to try to get 3 on the table to go through and spend time on.
With my forecasting background, I don't see anything in all of these discussions as to what our economy and what our population base is going to be like to focus our effort in reaching those kinds of goals. And you know, it's pretty darn hard because you know we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle to play with, number one, and continuity in government is always disconnected. So I don't know where we can go in the next 3 years serving under, you know, Mayor Kinoy, and to build something that can go on, you know, to the next administration. So,
But you're open to receiving policy ideas from any of us
Yeah.
if we have a few to
Anything you
suggest.
can be forwarded to me would help. I'm kind of wrestling with it based upon my experiences on Oahu in long-term strategic planning for the island
Mhm.
and water, and it's not that much different in energy
Yeah.
because they are very closely related. And my thought was that what we needed to do is have some sort of strategic thinking involved in it, not specific in detail.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anything else, Steve?
Yeah, so I'm on this committee for policy too, and I did get a draft of Steve's first cut at this. And yeah, I need to meet, we need to get together so we can formalize more and share that with the entire group.
And I think it goes hand in hand again, and it's leading to our third committee, which is education outreach and the community. And maybe I should have read this earlier, but intertwining and supporting other communities, however specializing in specific island demographics and communities, and providing energy opportunities and education, providing education opportunities for future generations, and example students, and integrate STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and collaborating with the electric company, Department of Education, etc. Co-chairs of this committee is Steve Burns and Tommy Goya. I am also a member of the committee, and we just had our first meeting, and Tommy or Steve, you want to just present some of the discussion points we had in our first meeting, which was on February 20th.
Steve, you can lead off as the county's first energy coordinator.
We did, you know, we're trying again, like everyone else, to understand the scope of the vision that's needed for the work that we're doing here. So we had a fair amount of discussion about the objectives and what seemed reasonable, practical versus what did not. And we're still discussing a lot of that because we don't necessarily believe that working specifically, as was initially suggested with the Pahala community, is the best viable way for us to go about doing our work. So we're reconsidering some of the different approaches that we might take. We did, one idea that came up was to better understand the needs of the different communities that are out there with respect to energy sustainability and the achievement of that. And within their communities and on the island as a whole. And an idea was to do some form of a survey, perhaps with the different communities, to gain a better understanding of not only where they stand and what their current knowledge is, but what their vision is and what their concerns are in terms of trying to move in that direction. That would give us a better point of reference to work with as a subcommittee in defining a specific educational or outreach objective. We talked about working and using resources of Hawaii Energy, working with them, looking at obviously where they are in terms of providing educational services to the communities here, and either supplementing or looking at ways of supplementing that, or bridging those efforts with additional efforts. Obviously all of this is oriented towards becoming energy sustainable. That is ultimately the goal from a community standpoint. And we did discuss that. I know it came up, the idea of community solar, which I've been proposing for some time now, as a possible pilot or test in a given community to demonstrate self-sufficiency, but it doesn't lay itself out to that, because community solar ultimately is a PUC docket that needs to be pursued in that way, and so it can't be something that's just tried in a community. It affects the way the utility does business, and it would have to be pursued from a policy standpoint and the regulatory arena first, before we could try something in a community. And by community solar, again, just to reiterate for everyone that may not have heard initially what the idea was, we're talking about having a large collective renewable energy system, wind or solar or whatever it happens to be, located in an area that the utility can easily accept that power, and to deal with this marginalization issue where people either don't have a roof space, they're apartment dwellers, they can't afford solar, they can't afford to do it on their own. It provides an opportunity for everybody to take advantage virtually by buying into a share of a large collective system, and then virtually receiving credits on their bill for the amount of energy that they purchase on a regular basis from that. And so, again, it's more of a regulatory program versus taking somebody off the grid, per se. It's not the same as going off grid completely. And that's come up on the mainland as a number of places that are investigating community solar look to address this problem of inequity and how you get broader participation in terms of individuals in the solar arena. So that's the idea we were talking about, and we didn't think that was feasible to implement on a trial basis in the Pahala area because, again, it's a regulatory thing that affects the utility. We talked about a possible, well, obviously there's opportunities to work with children in the education arena and all kinds that need to be explored. We didn't explore that at this point in time yet, but it's on the table to look at how we might do that more effectively. And the idea of an energy expo also came up as something that we're going to continue to explore. Bringing events perhaps to local communities or having more local participation somehow. And these could be any kind of small or large scale expo or event, or something that helps people understand something based on the needs previously identified within the community that we're hoping to filter out. So that's basically what we discussed in our first meeting. Obviously have a lot more work to do to define the vision of what exactly our subcommittee is going to be doing.
Just to add what Steve said, and to take some language out of Envision Downtown Hilo 2025, I think our role here is as vision keepers, not what they call lead solution partners. So we may set the direction and keep the focus there, but not the implementers of the activities itself, or the solution or understanding or the forum. We may play a role that is more of a guiding nature. Because for us to be fully immersed in the system of education, using the word education, is an awesome task that I don't think we can perform effectively as a 3-member or a 9-member commission here. So if we can keep the vision going and keep the focus there, I think there are opportunities for success in getting others, bringing to the table different groups and organizations to present, as Steve said, whether it's an expo or a small community event or a sustainability fair, where you bring in a holistic concept to your event. The other thing we need to do, I think, is we need to meet with All Energy and maybe include you in the mix in the next meeting. And I think this first meeting was for us to, the 3 of us, to see where we're at with each other and what our focus would be. So hopefully the next meeting will be a little more productive, and we'll welcome you to our meeting.
And I think that the biggest part of it was just basically making sure that we don't step on community's toes per se, because we need to, although we may think what the community wants, that's why we talked about the survey, so that we can actually grab a better understanding of, because each and every committee is entirely different on this island, especially on this island. And once we can find out and identify, possibly through a survey, then we can actually do something about it, to present something that may have more meaning for that particular community. And I think that's, for me, very valuable to understand, especially because, I've lived on 5 parts of this island, different communities, and I can tell you that it is a different lifestyle. So based on that, any questions for the education outreach and community or any other subcommittees? Hearing none, we can move forward to our new business, and I want to welcome our chair for our Energy Advisory Commission, David DeLue Jr., and Union Carey, the community board. Thank you.
You're welcome to finish.
Good job.
I'm just trying to keep it within an hour. So.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And by the way, just as a side note, the concept that we're moving forward in regards to successorship as far as leadership, I think works in this format. So in a way, I'm glad I'm not glad I was late, but I'm glad that at least we were able to conduct business and move it forward. So I appreciate that. Thank you for your understanding. On number 7, I just want to lay this one to rest at this meeting. If the format in regards to how we are meeting currently is suitable, in regards to our conversations with Margaret last meeting, as far as the different types of ways we can meet. And again, it was never intended to sidetrack or not be transparent in regards to Sunshine, but allow for the maximum amount of interaction. I believe the alternative that was available was called personal pigs, correct?
Let's not get
No, and that's why, I apologize, but I could not.
Permitted interaction group.
Correct. Is that, what is the consensus of the members? Is that suitable for what we would like to achieve within our roles as the committee? In other words, can the work of the committee be performed in that environment?
I think it's going to have to, because in order for us to get things done, and as I mentioned to Steve and Tommy, is that we want to get a lot of things done as fast as we can. So I think it gives us that opportunity.
So, meaning task force?
Or subcommittees.
Okay, so what would be, or would you prefer that the committees address that individually?
Yes.
And, okay, fine. So, as the need arises, depending upon what you, so we'll defer to the committees, and we just need to make sure that the commission is aware of your decision. Is that?
I'm not clear about what we're talking about.
Well, I think if a topic came up that borders on permitted interaction, then I would bring it up in the minutes of our subcommittee meeting to the commission.
Okay.
To further address and for clarification before moving on in whatever direction or whatever topic of discussion that was ongoing. And if we need to back off, then we'll back off. If we can proceed, then we'll proceed. But again, alluding to what Marvin said, you know, our fuse is short, and we'd like to get things done. And you know, it's a difficult task, but we feel that we can make some progress.
Steve, I'm sorry, did you?
Okay, so you're basically talking about the structure of the committees or the, whatever we call it, task force, and whether or not that's an acceptable approach. Okay.
Right. So so the consensus I'm hearing is that the subcommittees will determine at what point they feel it'll be adequate in which format to do the business of their subcommittees. Is that? And again, it's never to skirt transparency, it's to see how we can get the work done. Okay, so we always work with transparency in mind, it's, and go from there. So Tommy, that's a good point. Are we clear on that then? Okay,
Yeah.
great. So this will not be a matter of discussion, but as a reminder that if we could, in your little area in back, to just courteously remind us as far as our, right in the back, to ensure that we comply or we are transparent. As just a reminder to the committee, if you wouldn't mind.
And
On your agenda.
What would you like put there?
That it is the subcommittee's determination on how they would like to meet within the OIC's rules.
I'm gonna have to clarify that with.
Clarify that with
Council.
Marvin.
Yeah, and
So we can
again,
identify it.
and again, it's only to ensure that we're reminded that we need to be sure that we're transparent, okay?
Okay.
Any other clarification or do we need to further discuss this topic? Okay, great, thank you. Number 8, standing, and,
I'm sorry, that should be 7D.
oh, I apologize.
So 7A, what business,
I believe so.
Oh, there's 2 items there? I see.
Oh, I apologize,
No,
yes.
No, I thought that was one
Is that
item.
one item?
No, that's one item.
New business.
Yeah. Okay.
sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
I
thought
had
it
to find
changed.
you to fit on the other side.
All right, so, determine standing, and this would be for the commission meeting dates. Are we, I know that we defer to this meeting, yes, Don?
I'm sorry, 7A is that discussion and establishment of possible task force identifying all energy resources and stakeholders on island. I think that's something separate in what you were just talking about, the committee structures. I think this was an additional topic from the
Oh, I
last meeting
apologize, it was.
that you wanted to have the team to work on.
Right, and actually, this is the one I asked Will to start on, as far as the list. In fact, let's have discussion on that. Is there a need for that, or,
Yes.
okay, okay,
We went through an exercise fairly comprehensively last commission with the consultants that were here from the Kohala Center, identifying all the stakeholders possible that we could come up with. It was put on chart papers all around the room. There's a list ad nauseum that we've already come up with, you know, for putting that information out there. Is that something that's still available?
Yeah, I could definitely get that. If not, it's probably in my briefcase. So, yeah, I could bring that.
could I make a suggestion? Steve, would it be kosher, or would you work with Will to establish that as far as getting that information to the committee?
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Right, and then again, because you seems you have a good grasp at least, and then it will help to fill the holes. Now, once we get that information, how do we want to move forward with that to be able to be productive with it? And any thoughts there?
I I think it's just a good information for us to have, should we need to tap any one of those resources.
Okay.
For our communities or even for our people.
Well, the resources side, I'm not sure if we have a current list of resources. Obviously, that changes all the time, and there's new things that become available. And so that's an area where we could actually put some effort into
Okay.
coming up with something current. It was the stakeholder listing that I said
Okay.
that we had come up with something very extensive. So, yeah, I think there's still, if we're gonna do that, we still need to look at the resources side.
Yeah, and I think they would fit in those subcommittees, transportation policy, education outreach, and community to some intersecting bunch of circles.
So we ran into a bunch of problems, you know, just even identifying sources and resources. The biggest issue is land and land value. Because you can identify a technology, and once you add a particular site, it changes the land value. So it changes your economics of your project. So the consideration should be one for us to dwell on or just to identify. So it's really important, you know, because let's say a pump storage project, there are very few places where you can put pump storage of reasonable size. But if you're utilizing land that is has a change in elevation and you're using a particular pool, you know, it may not be feasible culturally. And again, if your water resource is limited in the area, then it compounds the particular problem. If it's open ag, and you know, it may not be a problem. So the consideration that we should have for the various resources to me, should be pretty general. Because we don't have all the answers and we're not technicians here. So we should stay away from technical issues which need to be worked out.
I want to throw this out if I could. Do you, and this is more addressed to Tommy, Marvin, and Steve, do you believe this is a subgroup as far as within the education outreach and community as far as working and to help us to start identifying this? I mean, again, it's starting, you know what I'm saying, as far as starting or compiling, working with the current list of, well, excuse me, that previous list, Steve, as you mentioned, with the stakeholders, and then integrating it with adding the resources. Is that part of it? And guys, the only reason I'm suggesting is I'm not trying to duplicate something. I'm trying to see if it's a function of something. You see what I'm getting at? It doesn't mean that this doesn't have stand its own merit. That's why I'm just a matter of discussion now.
Okay, let's throw open field crops, you know, for discussion. You know, where does it fit in? You know, is it bioenergy? Is it fuel? Do we have the designated land? Do we have the water resources? Tying into his general policy question, you know, ag support in what respect? Okay. So where does it move from policy to a government involvement to community education? Do we want more large, you know, field crops for energy or biofuels, or, you know, and where does sustainability fit in? As an educational committee, we're torn as to,
Right.
well, where do we focus our attention on? You know, because we want to be open to all technologies and all opportunities, but on the other hand, because of our land and where the resources are, you know, we have some limitations, or we have some further discussion left on the table. So, you know, that's only one small segment of current technology, what is available and what can be utilized, and where do we go from here? And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but you know, we do have some open issues here that we may not be able to answer.
And unfortunately, Tommy, I think what this exercise will generate is more questions. But again, I believe though, it doesn't, it goes with what you indicated as far as the envisioning part of it.
Right.
It creates a framework that it continues, because it's always gonna be a working process, it'll never stop. And so, the key, I believe, is establishing this essential, for lack of a better word, path or trail that will have many different variations of how you get to the, to your end goal, whatever that's gonna look like. And being able to, someone can take 5 different paths, it ends up at the end accomplishing the same outcome. Because it's not necessarily what we or a particular commission decides, it's what will actually drive it to get done. And that's gonna come in many different ways and forms. So with that being said, do you think an exercise as far as our commission, collectively with the commissioners, work on this, and then we then see if it falls within, first of all, we establish what that looks like from our perspective and what we have as far as information. And then we work to trim it down to what we believe is accomplishable items, and then where does it fit? Policy, transportation, education, outreach, community. That's just, again, bring my thought here. But first, we need to do the exercise, or do we collectively put together what we feel as individuals, we feed that in to Will, he gets it back to us, and then at our next meeting, we concentrate a bulk of our effort in that exercise.
Well, that's what I was gonna mention, Dave. I don't think Tommy gave a yes or no answer whether it should fall in the subcommittees, but an option that we should look at is identifying the resources through the administration side.
Okay.
Under research and development, and to just lay out. You already have a stakeholder list, and from there we can work off that list, come up with the resources that are available, and then separate them out.
Let me ask for a point of clarification, I guess. When we're talking about resources, are we referring specifically to energy generation resources? Or all kinds of resources related to the development of future energy resources? That's a big question. And when I look at this objective, this is pretty much integrated resource planning is what we're talking about here. If we're looking at selecting among different resources to come up with how we achieve a vision of energy production in the future for this island. And there's a lot more that needs to go into a process like that, obviously, than just the identification of energy resources. There's a whole, like Tommy was saying, the whole forecasting area. If things are not the same in 3 years as they are today, that's a whole different vision and scenario that we need to plan for versus assuming that everything's status quo over time. And so that's a huge aspect of looking at how we deal with the identification of resources and how they're applied and what we ultimately do. So it's a huge, complex process, as you all know, to do integrated resource planning that involves a lot more beyond resource identification and selection. So I don't know exactly what ultimately we can do with this information once we gather it, other than present it as the currently available technologies, without going through a more detailed planning process that includes things like forecasting and externalities and all those things that come up when you're actually trying to look at how you package a comprehensive set of generation resources to meet a future envisioned need on the island. So I'm not sure. I think based on that, at least acknowledgement in my part, I would be more comfortable just dealing with it within the committees as it's associated with whatever recommendations that we're gonna be making within the committee structure. Obviously, having a list, and I think, isn't that more or less what the Kohala Center report did? They put together a list of what currently is out there. We have that. I don't know how much, you know, obviously it's gonna continue to change over time. But, you know, a lot of the criticism with the Kohala Center report was it was done absent of any future forecasting. And so what do we, you know, how valuable and useful is that information when we're not gonna apply it necessarily to something that's the same as it is today? So it's a bigger process in terms of making it useful, I think is my bottom line statement on this. Open to discussion, obviously.
Excuse me, Will, do you think that our minutes or the actual report itself reflects all of this already? You're saying, you know, from those chart flip papers, I don't have a memory of the flip papers with the chart papers sticking all over the wall, but I remember a detailed meeting. Do you think we have them?
I think I could get it. If it's not in the binder, which I think it is.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, I think it's all there.
Now, those were stakeholders related to the achievement of energy sustainability
Right.
as a whole. It wasn't stakeholders per resource type.
Right.
And I don't know if that's what was intended here. So it may be a different, vision of what we're looking at, but that's a bigger list. And obviously, you could pull from that list to fill in this list, because that was more comprehensive.
And Steve and Tommy, actually, you folks you hit it on the nail in regards to, the way that I envisioned this was a starting of, for lack of a better word, an inventory on Island. And it's actually, a concept, when I presented this to Will, was it should generate actually deeper thought on what direction and strategy we want to take. So it's going to actually lead into more tangents. But the concept is, do we really understand what we have and what we need to do with it, or how we're going to move that to where we want it to go? And I don't know if we've really gotten to that mindset. Now, please understand, I'm not saying that this is going to actually have us to be able to achieve the specificity. I think you hit it really well, Steve. It's then allows the committee, the subcommittees to say, okay, these are some of the topics we want to bring in and actually bisect it and dissect it and what have you to achieve this ultimate outcome, or at least to get enough foundation where it leads to the next step. So a lot of what I see is building blocks. And if we can hopefully create enough momentum on the building blocks, then we build more capacity into how we're going to do that. I think the biggest challenge to a large degree is when we get something like these reports, as you said, is, okay, forecasting was not involved. So to me, that's one of the issues we need to establish. So how do we get that on the plate, on the table, to get it to where it needs to go, and why is that significant in that strategic value? And where does it fit within the scopes of what we're doing in the subcommittees? And some of it may, as the discussion goes in the subcommittees, may cross over policy perhaps and what have you. My thing is though is we have at least the working framework of it touching, so that the other realizes how to leverage it when there's opportunities to touch or cross. And so the concept is not to be siloed, is to have more of that. Does it make it more difficult to stay focused in regards to some of the outcomes? There's no doubt. Does it create more questions that leads to more questions? Definitely. But I believe that exercise in itself and being able to engage is probably where we need to get to, so people become more vested in wanting it to continue. It's kind of like CEUs, continuing education process. We're keep going and building upon what we have, and never lose fact that it's never where we need to, it's never going to get where we want to, but then we don't just give up because we didn't achieve it in that one segment. We just have to continue it. So I would see it as a resource, and then the subcommittees would pull from where they believe they've got substance to actually get something done.
Aren't a lot of this stuff identified already in the Kohala Center report?
Yeah.
I mean, they pretty much gave us a status quo, right, of the resources on the island and everything.
Yeah,
So we can extract the information from there,
I would, yeah.
update.
I mean, there's lots, the things that are going on, like Steve said, are the integrated resource planning process. So we know that that's a PUC docket, and that's the charter of the electric utility. We know that there's dockets existing like decoupling. We know that there's an energy efficiency program. These are your building blocks. So energy efficiency within the decoupling paradigm pushes higher cost energy to people who don't do it. PV, NEM, in the decoupling paradigm pushes higher electricity rates to those that don't. So there's some building blocks that we should be aware of, back to David's point, that are interacting with each other. When you set up a microgrid, if you will, with PV storage and transportation, now you're building that community system you're talking about. Where does that fit in, and what are the actions necessary to actually do that? And is that good for the island? Those are the building blocks that I would see that would be very useful for me, that aren't identified in the Kohala Center plan.
And just as a note, the last report that the previous commission did, you asked some really tough questions that needed to be addressed. What I'm hoping that this actually is taking from that and moving it next. So in other words, okay, this is the question, this is what we're gonna identify with and start moving it. And it, again, I really do believe, folks, it's gonna lead to even deeper questions. But again, I don't think there's an end game to this, as opposed that it's a continuous evolution. But what we need to be cognizant of fact, though, is how can we build it so we're not continuously having the dog chase its tail? And whatever we create, whatever we do now creates foundation for our predecessors and fellow commissioners in the future. So I do think that what will happen if we do this, what I'm hearing from the Kohala Center report, it gives us what I call the baseline as far as where we move it. And then that should be where I believe that subcommittees will take a hard look at what they believe they will pull from to be able to create their strategy and what they believe is important to achieve. Work on, maybe is a better word. And then what the outcomes of that is what, comes out of that. Does that help as far as what this would accomplish, or at least would start to accomplish? And would it be beneficial to have it produced and then decide if there's further action that needs to be taken as a commission versus subcommittees? Again, it's for discussion.
Maybe we should circulate the information again and review the information by the Kohala Center first before,
Okay.
getting too philosophical here.
And that's fine, and Tommy, that's why I believe is, there's some of you have better grasp on it than us. You can give your insight, and when it gets circulated, the only thing is, we need to funnel it through Dot, and then she'll bring it back out, or Will. Actually, as long as Will, you blind CC us.
Sure.
Yeah, because it comes back to the basic question, what we know is transportation is over half, okay? And that electric system losses are more than the actual use of energy. To produce electricity, there's losses. To transmit electricity, there's losses. And the use of electricity is the other component. So we're saying 50% transportation, 40% electricity related. So, you know, it's easy to say where our focus should be. Again, you know, it's transportation, but transportation is a long-term objective here without raising, you know, fees or being penal. And electric system losses and generation, you know, we gotta take a closer look at that, but, you know, do we have the expertise here in that area? You know, we're not transmission, distribution, or generation people in this room, and we can only focus on the 15% of consumption. You know, is it gonna be education, or are they gonna be, you know, government imposition? You know, we tried that with building codes, and, you know, we charged pretty hard on that, you know, a few years ago, and, you know, there were some difficult choices and things that didn't make sense when you get down to the details here. So I guess I need time personally to review where our focus should be and what effort we should concentrate on to make ourselves more effective as a commission here in the next few years.
Which leads into how often do you folks believe we need to meet to accomplish these goals? Which is number 8.
Well, if the 3 areas have their charter, and we keep to the monthly reporting schedule, then, you know, at least we can make the initial progress to understand where we're at and what we need to do. You're gonna stretch that out, we're gonna fill it with other.
Oh, no, and that's why, I mean, I think it leads into that conversation is what I'm saying. Input?
I think we should monthly, so we can get updates on our committee, subcommittee reports. And it'll keep us in the butts to come up with something, do something within that time frame.
Steve?
I'm in agreement.
Steve, you give it. Now, and that's fine. What does our schedules look like? Because the easier we establish it now, and I would ask that we take at least 2 dates so that Dot can make sure that facilities are available.
I actually took the liberty of working what I thought we were gonna work with, which was the first Tuesday of the
Oh, yes.
month. And I have secured for the rest of the year,
Okay.
except 1 month, I believe, which is November. And I did bring it, but I will send it off to you. It is every first Tuesday here at the Puna Conference Room. I have not secured any Cross Island location for any video conferencing, but we can discuss that later. And making sure, I think that IT has that connection in these rooms first. But I can send that list out to you folks, but it should be every first Tuesday of the month going forward.
Any further discussion as far as the date? Is that satisfactory to us? And so really the next opportunity is involvement, and so could I suggest we ask Dot what the opportunities would be for video conferencing in the various county facilities, and what the logistics will be on that?
What we've done, I think, in the past was, Will would remain in the Kona office, that we would try to get the mayor's conference room, but when it's on a Tuesday, the mayor's conference room is occupied. So we'll have to look for other locations kind of near R&D in Kona. Then Will could be there, and then anyone that was interested or lived on that site could attend there, and then we could just video conference the two. And it seemed to work. Sometimes I think, depending on the topic, you guys might want to come back together, but I can check, because I have to just verify location compatibility.
Any discussion with that? So what I'm hearing is first Tuesday of the month is fine. unless there's a need, it will be held in Hilo at our Puni, at the Puna Conference Room at the Main County building. And right now, we'll look to do a video conferencing at West Hawaii Civic Center. And then from there, we can determine on the projects we do if we need to look at other geographical areas as far as additional video conferencing sites. Would that be acceptable, or at least a start? Okay. Right.
So I will forward those dates off to you all, and just know that I could always give it up, you know. I don't have to use it. It would be nice, I think, to let them know before.
Right, and the other thing too is, when we establish a schedule, it allows the public to understand where we're gonna be at as well, which I think is important. So, the only thing that we have not confirmed, unless Dot, you'll be able to work out the logistics, is on our next meeting, if we'll have a video conferencing site. Other than that, we can plan from May on that we should work those logistics out on video
Okay.
conferencing. Is that okay as far as the time frame, folks?
Gives me more time to establish that other room.
Okay. All right, what I'd like to do is, before we adjourn, is I'd like to go around the room if there's any additional comments or things we've not discussed within the context of, add and anything we need to look at that we perhaps may not have had an opportunity to say. So if we could, to my right, Mr. Calvin, go out, sir.
Nothing to add.
No comments? Thank you for.
I'd like to ask Will a quick question, if I could. What is the status of the energy emergency preparedness planning process here?
That, actually, that's moved to number one for I have a project list, I have a docket list, I have an energy efficiency list. That's my number one project. So what we're going to do is take the assets across the island and categorize what we would need to do in a very emergency situation. So there are a number of generators, we certainly need to know this. So I've been empowered by the mayor to go and meet with Darrell. I've been empowered to also use some money to take an inventory of the island and our emergency assets, as far as I'm responsible for fuel and things like that already in an emergency situation, but I need to get a list of assets that would help me out.
Would you mind keeping us updated in your report about what's going on? I really feel that's an important area. It's came up in our last group in terms of revising and having a viable emergency preparedness plan for long-term sustained fuel shortages. And so, yeah, be helpful for us to know.
Absolutely, yep.
It's a good Pacific Rim conference.
Well, it's my number one agenda.
I'd go one step further, Steve, can the county identify before our next meeting the number one priority in regards to work on within that and bring it to the commission? I mean, seriously, and see how, and then we can from there decide, well, it's just my perspective, but I think it end up in education, outreach, and community from that regard, on the community segment, okay? But I think that's a real doable deal as far as interaction on that, if you wouldn't mind.
So the question is, should I bring my number one priority to the
Well, if
commission?
you can, it's a starting list of what you established, what Steve asked, but from your perspective
Right,
and interaction, if you had the opportunity to talk to Chief Oliveira
Right.
and the administration,
yes.
what if they, I would think they could identify the number one, and let's see if we can start working on making it happen.
Yeah, well, it's kind of bipolar, if you will, in civil defense situations. What we just talked about is obviously number one. In periods of calm, number one is economic development. So it just, you know, those are the two sides of the sword that I'm always looking at.
Right, I think though, and the specificity, what I heard, and if please, if I'm saying something, interrupt, but I heard this viable emergency preparedness. So from that perspective, I believe we're skewing it to the civil defense initiative. Is that, am I?
Well, it depends. If it's long-term, it's gonna go beyond that.
Well, so maybe what I would suggest is, and this is something, well, I'll share what my comments that I want to do is, I'm gonna be incumbent upon myself to give the mayor a mid-year status of what we're at and what our goals are. So from my perspective, kind of feeding off Tommy when I came in later, is look at a project that you believe has the capacity for strong traction and implementation of being able to get that going within this calendar year. And that's how I would suggest to Will, he brings, you know, that strategic preparedness. Now, if it's on the civil defense side, so be it. If it's on the other side, but I believe it's important to get the traction, moving it, and then from there, and again, it's probably going to create more, you know, tangents. But would you folks feel comfortable giving Will that direction in regards to that? And it's going to come from the administration. So this kind of goes with the goal of the county being a leader in this, and we working to assist in implementation and fleshing out some of the things that needs to be considered. Because there's many things to be considered, I mean, there's no doubt.
Yeah, the 30th anniversary of that Tohoku disaster is a week away.
Good point.
And then, you know, we try and refresh people, the deal was devastated by a tsunami, so that educational portion is a continuous process. It's an everyday process. To bring awareness, you know, why do we test our sirens once a month?
You know, this is so ironic. I was listening to NPR this morning, and it was on immunization. And there was a study that they did, and apparently, and I could be incorrect, but the gist I got out of it, people who didn't know were actually more apt to get the immunization as opposed to those who did know and understood the consequence. So it's the human mind works unbelievably, I think, in reverse in some of these as far as how we think education should be delivered in some of these matters. So what I'm getting at is, you're right, Tommy. Even though it's been done, it may have not been in a way that people are actually receiving it to understand or make use of it. And so I think the exercise is excellent, that we need not forget about that. So again, to reiterate, Will, if we could, what is the number one, you know, opportunity that we have as far as a priority, if you could identify from the administrative side? But again, yes.
That could not necessarily help us address what needs to be addressed though, because there's gonna be short-term
Yes.
events and there'll be potentially long-term events. And the approach that's taken is gonna be different. And obviously, you're gonna first plan for the short-term event, because something like that's more likely. Does that mean we forget about the long-term stuff? And so, you know, picking just one doesn't necessarily accomplish, you know, providing for what we need ultimately. And so, you know, and then the last time around, when we made the recommendation to the mayor, it was to come up with something we didn't currently have. We have a short-term energy emergency preparedness plan. We don't have something for long-term, right?
But the irony of it, how much of it actually is within what we can manage and control geographically and locally? It does not necessarily depend on the resources we have here. That's why I did that here. I mean, from my perspective, we need to act like there's nobody else available in case of an emergency. That all we have is the resources here, and we gotta figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And really, Steve, that was my intent here, is, you know, worst case scenario, we have a pandemic flu, whatever, I mean, and our borders essentially, we gotta do with what we have here, and that's it, baby.
Yeah. So how do we make that work? I mean, that's the plan ultimately.
Right, and the reality is, I do believe we have it, it's just that we haven't been able to put it together to figure out how we're gonna manage and implement it. So much of it is just peripheral, a lot of individuals are doing it, but again, we gotta start someplace, and that's what the concept. Steve, I'm sorry, any further?
No?
Mr. Bowles?
No, I just keep thinking of this, we're at this point where we gotta move some stuff forward. We got enough basis to move forward on.
Tommy?
Well, let's work on some agenda items here, so that we can stay focused. Besides the committee reports, what would you like to see in our next month's agenda? I know we have a shopping list of things we already talked about, but, it's a Koala Center report, should we circulate it out and
Yes.
come back with discussion, number one? When are we gonna bring Hawaii Energy to the table? Number two. Number three, we had department managers come here and give reports of what their interests and what they're doing. And I think that's always helpful, so if we can try and schedule that in the future, so that we know directly from the various departments how they're working to move the county in that energy efficiency or sustainability direction, and are they maintaining it? Whatever you can.
I just want to add what Tommy just said there, because I think we did this before, was getting the department managers walking the talk. That's one of the reasons why I sit on this commission, is to ensure how we focus the county to walk the talk first, and getting that done by the departments. We already met with the departments back so many months ago regarding transportation. That was a great start, but for everyone else, sake, benefit to hear what other departments are doing as well. We got an interview.
Yeah, I mean, the discussion with Public Works was very interesting. We looked at them up there where they're at on their energy efficiency initiatives. But I wanted to add that we just like to recommit to do the permitted interaction group on our policy with Steve. Get together on that. And I just wanted to ask, so I came in late, and so I missed if there was any public comment, but it appears there were additional folks came in after, and I don't know if we can go back to that and allow public folks to share
We can.
any thoughts.
Any input from the public that you'd like to draw or present to the commission?
Well, in reverse order, how many of you are ICS compliant? Integrated Systems Command Systems. That's how FEMA lays out command and control when an emergency is declared. And you can go on the FEMA site. I would suggest that you at least be ICS 100 or 300 compliant if you're going to have this. So you know who's in fact running the show, and how it's going to be managed and who's going to be the managers. I mean, technically, the mayor is automatically in charge when an emergency is, but the reality of that is somewhat different. So I'm just starting there, because it's a good discussion to have. I mean, and anybody who has missed a video, of which there is a lot, of the Fukushima Japan disaster. I'm with Coast Guard Auxiliary here, so we do have some discussion about this, what our response would be, and how we're managed. The other stuff is, I'm gonna let you work it out a little bit.
The county does have a structured emergency response plan through civil defense with, identifying different,
Yeah, I'm
different scenarios.
Yeah, but I mean, they work through the ICS command system.
Right. Right.
So I just thought it would be helpful for the people here to understand how that system functions,
Mhm.
you know, and who is communicating with whom and on what topic. Because yes. it
And the
is-
classes can be taken online.
Exactly.
You can take these ICS courses through FEMA online. And,
Right. Yeah, they're all there, they're free, they're available to
get
anybody.
nice certificates when you pass.
Yeah. Put it on the wall.
Maybe it'd be useful to consider having someone from civil defense come and present what their current plans are.
Yeah, that would be good after a couple months of meeting with Darrell.
Anyone else from the public that'd like to share their thoughts or any what we so far discussed? My comments. What I want to make sure is any of the things you folks have mentioned, if you could, and again, I've taken some notes, but if you can just chime in, and we're gonna start a list of who we want to invite, and we're gonna start calendaring it, so that we make, and then of course, the subject matter may change, but that's okay, but if you know already what you think we'd want them to present, or what you'd like them to come prepared to present to the commission, that's great. At the other point is when the subcommittees get into their work, I'd like for you folks to make sure that you let Dot know if you have any scheduled speaker that's gonna come in front of your subcommittees that you would like other commissioners to be aware of, so that they, they can have the opportunity to participate as well. And then,
At that point, you'll public.
yes, and that's why we need to ensure that, and again, depending upon the magnitude, depending upon, and so as a courtesy, we'll make sure it's addressed to the chairs. And if they believe they would rather do an investigative meeting and then report to the commission, that is gonna be your folks' call. You need to be respectful of the fact that it may hinder your capacity as opposed to furthering it, so that's not an issue.
I thought that, sorry.
No, go ahead, Steve.
The rules of the subcommittee or the PIG were that the designated members could all meet, but they couldn't talk about their agenda items with the other, outside of the full meeting, the other members of the commission. So if we were to schedule in our subcommittee a presentation that we thought might be useful for other members to hear, it seems to me like we would, if there was interest, we would have to do that as a commission as a whole. Is that right?
That's my understanding, Steve, but that would be the safer way to do it. We're not trying to manage OIC and the Sunshine Law, to do something.
Right, so do you want to set the policy then that we're gonna ask if there's other interest whenever we have a presenter coming in?
That's gonna be your call as a committee. And because you may have extreme specificity in what you want to accomplish out of that, and an interaction to accomplish what you want. I'll give you a good example, and Tom, thank you for coming. One of the things that we've asked Tom to assist us with as an individual from the community is to work with the transportation, because of his depth and breadth within the county's planning, what he's done is to capitalize and leverage that intellectual capital into the committee. So in Tom's situation, he can meet without having to be worried about OIC. What we need to be careful is not engage in Tom as commissioners and it links back to one of us. That's scary. But what I'm saying is in the sense that we don't want to look like is we're trying to influence a commissioner or give them information that if there is any vote or any matter of business, there's any sense of impropriety. But I would encourage you folks to engage in what I call community experts, to be part of invite them into your committees, and the goal, of course, is so it gets more rooted to a grassroots effort. Okay. And so, but again, Tom, they've done a lot of things already in mass transit that we wanna, it's kind of like the last commission, they did a lot of work, but how do we capitalize in making it move forward? Same thing with, when Tom was there, they did a lot of work. How do we help, how does this commission be able to transform that into actionable items, as you say, Steve? And we do believe that transportation probably has the opportunity to fall low-hanging fruit. Ironically, this issue of emergency preparedness is, we believe, the other low-hanging fruit in actuality. And in fact, just to share, about 10 days ago, Will was engaging in that as part of an initiative. So it was on his priority. In fact, that day, I believe, he was meeting with the chief, or Chief Alacaro, or the following day. So the good news is there's a lot of parallel energy moving in that direction. We just got to figure out how to make some of it happen. Okay. If there's no other further comments or business, our next meeting will be April, I believe it's 7th. Correct?
First.
Oh, April 1st. Oh, yeah, that's right, April 1st.
Seriously. I mean,
Go on.
you know, if you folks don't want that date. I'm just saying, I don't care.
Tommy, in regards to the specific items though, what I wanted to ensure in the committees is everyone in this room has extreme amount of talent and knowledge in your areas. The formation of the committee, subcommittees, was done in attempting to utilize your folks' talents in maximizing the outputs. With that being said, I do believe that you folks have the ability to strategically come up with what you folks believe is what needs to be achieved. Now, the concept here is, although it may not be on the minds of some of us as a priority, the outcomes are not going to be disputed. I cannot emphasize the fact that more times than not in my very short life, just because someone feels it's got to be done a certain way, it doesn't necessarily mean it gets done if the passion, the energy, and the alignment isn't achieved somewhere else. So I believe, from my perspective, is you guys know what you need to do, you guys understand the enormity of the issue. The question is, how do you get it down to the point where it's relevant to the people that you folks, in other words, your committees, your subcommittees, because you're gonna feed off each other's energy. So I trust that whatever you folks will do will work. As indicated to Will, his main function is to be a resource of what he needs to provide to you folks and to support your initiative. Whether it's gathering of information, whether it's being able to assist you in getting people to come to the table, and Tommy, you're right, as a resource in establishing that. No further business. Then I move for adjournment.
So move.
Moved by Tommy,
Second.
second by Mike, 11:42. And again, I apologize for being late to the public as well.
Join the ring, so short.
Yeah.